Dust spiraled in lazy twists behind my truck as I eased to a stop at the edge of the valley. Late afternoon sun cast a copper glow across everything, from the ridgeline behind me to the polished metal street signs far below. The old place used to be nothing but open earth, just 40 acres of raw, wind-scoured land I inherited from my grandfather. No one cared about it then. It was too rocky to farm and too isolated to entice casual buyers. But now it was the beating heart of Willow Ridge, a master-planned community that had sprouted like a steel and concrete crop. 512 homes, a clubhouse with an Olympic-sized pool, walking trails, a tiny lake they'd carved out of irrigation runoff and pretended was natural. All of it built on land that was, on paper, in ink that hadn't faded, still mine. I stepped out and shut the truck door with a solid click, the kind of sound that makes you feel grounded. The air smelled faintly of cut grass and fresh asphalt, nothing like it used to. I remembered the sagebrush, the dust, the way the wind howled without anything to stop it. Now everything was curated, arranged, softened for suburban comfort. A breeze passed, but it didn't howl. It whispered through neatly planted maples that hadn't existed when this land was just wild. From where I stood, I could see part of the cul-de-sac that curved like a question mark at the edge of the development. A woman in yoga pants walked a golden retriever. A teenager in headphones zipped by on an electric scooter. Sprinklers ticked rhythmically along the sidewalk. Perfect, controlled, predictable. If only the HOA had realized that the one thing they couldn't control was me. I pulled the old leather folder from the passenger seat. Its corners were worn, the stitching frayed, my grandfather's handiwork. He'd kept important papers inside and passed it to me like a baton the day he died. "Everything you'll ever need to know about this land is in here," he had said, breath thin but eyes sharp. At 18, I didn't fully understand the weight of that statement. At 37, I understood it perfectly. Inside were the original surveys, hand-drawn maps, the mineral rights lease that had never been used, and most importantly, the deed that the HOA and the developer had somehow forgotten to secure when they bulldozed the first acre. I used to tell myself it was an honest oversight. Overworked clerks, lost paperwork, corporate negligence. These things happen. That illusion lasted until the HOA president, Richard Halford, decided to stop taking my calls. Then he stopped returning my emails, and finally, after 2 years, he sent a lawyer who spoke to me like I was a nuisance, someone clinging to a memory rather than holding a legal claim. That was when I realized it wasn't an oversight. It was arrogance. They thought I was just some country idiot who'd get tired of pushing, someone they could steamroll with jargon and time, someone who'd eventually give up. But I didn't give up. I waited. I watched. And while I did, they kept building. Every home, every walking trail, every light post, each was another nail in the coffin they were building for themselves. Because the longer they ignored me, the more leverage I gained. The more they invested, the more they put on land that wasn't theirs, the bigger the eventual fallout would be. 5 years of this development rising like a private kingdom, and not once did they check whether the foundation of that kingdom was legally theirs. I walked down the slope, boots crunching over gravel until pavement replaced earth beneath my feet. A kid pedaled past on a bike adorned with handlebar streamers. He gave me a friendly nod, clueless that everything his parents thought they owned was about to be questioned. I didn't blame the homeowners. They were just people looking for a place to live. They weren't the ones who had made the deal with me, the one that was supposed to compensate me generously in exchange for the land. A deal the HOA president swore would be fast, fair, and formal. Except they never made it formal. And I had the documents to prove it. I paused at the entrance sign, "Welcome to Willow Ridge, where community begins." The letters gleamed like they had been polished earlier that morning. Beneath the sign, petunias bloomed in neat patches of purple and white. An HOA member was probably assigned to check the flowers weekly. They liked their order here. Funny thing about order, people who worship it tend to panic when something threatens it. I reached the sidewalk and glanced around. A man wearing a visor drove past in a golf cart covered with HOA stickers. A clipboard sat on his lap like it was part of his anatomy. He didn't notice me, not really. I wasn't on his list of things to manage today. If only he knew. I stopped across from the clubhouse. The building was modern-styled with big windows and a stone facade. I could see a meeting happening inside, maybe a committee gathering or a planning session. At the head of the table sat Richard Halford, the man himself, Same polo shirts, same sunglasses pushed up on his head like he was permanently caught between a golf course and a boardroom. He didn't see me. He wasn't looking for me. He should have been. I opened the leather folder, carefully lifting the deed from inside as if it were an artifact. The edges were yellowed, but the text was crisp. My name was there. My grandfather's notarized signature, the county clerk's embossed stamp. A perfectly valid document proving everything they built sat on property they did not own. For 5 years I could have walked into court at any time. But I chose today. Not because anything special happened, not because I was angry. Today just felt right, like the land itself was telling me it was time. A breeze brushed against my face. I watched the neat community, so proud of its perfection, so confident in its stability. They thought the land beneath them was theirs. And in less than an hour, a judge would tell them otherwise. I closed the folder, tucked it tightly under my arm, and headed back to the truck. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't uncertain. I had the deed, I had the law, and I had time. 5 years of it perfectly preserved. The HOA just didn't know it yet. The courtroom buzzed like a hive. Low voices, shifting feet, the occasional squeak of a chair. It wasn't built for the kind of tension filling it now. People crammed shoulder to shoulder along the benches. Homeowners whispered nervously, clutching folders and manila envelopes. HOA board members sat in the front row, huddled so tightly they looked like birds protecting themselves from a storm. The storm was me. I walked down the aisle slowly, not for dramatic effect, but because I wanted to take everything in. 5 years of being dismissed had sharpened my senses, and now every detail felt electric. The polished wood of the railing, the clack of the court clerk's keyboard, the way people stared at me, curious, worried, unsure. Some looked hopeful. They didn't know why yet. Richard Halford, the HOA president, sat stiffly beside his lawyer, a man who appeared to be sweating through a suit that probably cost more than a year of my mortgage. Richard's face had the tight-lipped look of someone who'd been given very bad news very recently. His eyes dodged mine, the way a kid avoids a neighbor whose window he just broke. The judge entered, brisk and precise, the type of judge you instinctively didn't want to annoy. We all rose. The hardwood floor creaked under dozens of feet. When we sat again, the tension doubled, as though inhaling wasn't enough. "Court is now in session," the judge said. His voice was calm but firm, like he'd already read the briefs and knew we were in for a long day. "We are here regarding case number 22-481, Carson versus Willow Ridge Homeowners Association and Willow Ridge Development Group." Even hearing the case title spoken aloud sent a ripple across the room. 50 homeowners glanced at one another in silent panic. Someone in the back whispered, "What does this mean for us?" Another hissed back, "Just listen." The judge turned his attention to me. "Mr. Carson, please approach." My boots thudded softly against the courtroom floor as I walked to the bench. I placed the old leather folder on the table before me. I opened it carefully, revealing the deed. The paper was aged but well protected. Everyone could see the official seals and careful handwriting. "My claim," I said steadily, "is simple. Willow Ridge was built on my land. Land the HOA and the developer never legally purchased. I still hold the original deed. The transfer of ownership was never completed by either party. And despite construction, despite 5 years of occupation, the land legally remains under my name." A murmur rose behind me like a gust of wind. The judge lifted the document and adjusted his glasses. He didn't speak for a moment. He read, line by line, signature by signature. His brow furrowed in a way I liked. It meant he was seeing what I already knew. Finally, he asked, "Mr. Carson, to your knowledge, was there ever an agreement, verbal or written, that conveyed ownership to the HOA or the developer?" "There was an intention," I answered, "a promise, but no formal transaction, no funds transferred, no contract executed. They built anyway." The HOA's lawyer stood abruptly, knocking a pen off the table. He scrambled to retrieve it, then cleared his throat hard, trying to sound composed. "Your Honor, this situation is highly irregular. Even if the deed predates construction, the development proceeded under the assumption that ownership had been secured. We have correspondence." The judge cut him off, raising a hand. "Assumptions are not ownership, counselor. Property rights are not transferred by assumption." The lawyer swallowed so loudly I could hear it from 10 feet away. "A homeowner, A middle-aged woman with a baby carrier at her feet stood up, trembling. "Your Honor, are you saying our houses might not belong to us?" "Ma'am," the judge said gently, "I understand your concern. But please allow the proceedings to continue." The room quieted again, though the anxiety was thick enough to taste. The judge returned his attention to the deed. He tapped the page. "This deed is clear. Mr. Carson's ownership was never relinquished." The HOA lawyer stepped forward again. "Your Honor, if I may, this creates a catastrophic legal burden. Hundreds of families." "Then you should have ensured proper legal transfer," the judge snapped, and the lawyer visibly shrank. My heart beat steadily. Not fast, not triumphant, steady. This wasn't revenge. This was justice catching up. The judge sat back, his gaze sharpened. "Mr. Halford, president of Willow Ridge HOA, please stand." Richard rose but looked like he was about to faint. His hands trembled despite his attempts to hide them. "Did the HOA or the developer complete the legal purchase and title transfer from Mr. Carson?" Richard's voice was thin. "We believed the developer had taken care of it." "That is not what I asked." Richard's lip twitched. "No, Your Honor, we did not confirm it." A collective gasp swept through the room. One woman whispered, "I knew it," like she'd been waiting for this truth to surface. The judge nodded slowly, his expression carved in stone. "In that case, the law is clear. Without a legitimate transfer, the land, and therefore the property beneath the structures, remains under the legal ownership of Mr. Carson." Another ripple of shock moved through the courtroom, louder this time. Someone cursed under their breath. Someone else started crying softly. Richard slumped into his chair, defeated. His lawyer rubbed his forehead like he had a migraine that would never end. The judge addressed me again. "Mr. Carson, given the extraordinary circumstances, what remedy are you seeking?" The room leaned in, physically leaned in, as though every spine had been pulled forward by a single invisible string. I paused, letting the silence thicken. 5 years of being ignored, 5 years of them pretending. I had no leverage, no voice, no presence in their perfect little world. Now everyone was listening. "I want compensation," I said plainly. "Fair, full compensation for the land, at its current developed value, not the value it had 5 years ago. And I want it paid by the parties responsible for failing to complete the transfer, the HOA and the developer." The HOA lawyer sputtered. "That could be tens of millions." "Yes," I said. "It could." The judge raised a hand again, silencing the outburst. "Given the evidence, Mr. Carson's request is within his rights. The HOA and the developer will need to negotiate a settlement, or this court will begin proceedings to determine restitution and potential liens." The word liens hit the HOA board so hard that 2 of them looked like they might pass out. Homeowners began murmuring again, outrage turning toward the front of the room. Richard's head dropped into his hands. He had gone from polished king of the suburb to a man watching his entire kingdom crumble in under 20 minutes. The judge rapped his gavel once. "This court acknowledges that the deed is valid, the land belongs to Mr. Carson, and the HOA acted unlawfully in assuming ownership without proper transfer." Gasps. Cries. Someone muttered, "We're suing the HOA after this." The judge continued, voice final. "A settlement negotiation will be mandatory. Court adjourned." As the gavel cracked a second time, Richard looked at me with a mix of dread and pleading. I met his eyes evenly. "I told you 5 years ago," I said quietly enough for only him to hear. "You should have handled everything." Then I turned, deed under my arm, and walked out through a courtroom that had become a battlefield of consequences.